This week, the first of the LessWrong posts we're talking about is empty labels. Eliezer talks about classes of things and the qualities of the things we're talking about, and he doesn't go like into terms like spherical, blue, fuzzy as he did before, but just reduces it down to A, B, C, D. Really simple things. It says, Aristotelian classes work purely on structures like A, C, D. To call one of these structures Zawa or attach any other label to it is a human convenience. Then points out that let's say that human is to be defined as a mortal, featherless biped. Then the classic syllogism would have the form, all mortals, not feathers, bipedal, are mortal. Socrates is a mortal, not feathers, bipedal. Therefore, Socrates is mortal.
And this feat of reasoning looks a lot less impressive when phrased that way.
Yeah, it's the things you defined to have those properties have those properties. It says that this illusion of inference comes from the labels which conceal the premises and pretend to novelty in the conclusion.
I skimmed the comments, not to jump to the end here, but some people are like, I feel like you're being too hard on Aristotle, and like, why are you grinding against him so hard? And his reply is basically like, it's not Aristotle in particular, it's the influence on like what people considered rationality after that, that lasted thousands of years. I feel like that's the huge problem. But it is kind of funny. It's like, because today, if an Aristotelian logician were to present that proof to me that Socrates, all men are mortal, Socrates is man, therefore Socrates is mortal, I'd be like, what do you mean, like, that Socrates is a man? What do you mean by mortal? And how do you know that all men are mortal, right? All obvious now, but in Aristotle's time, huge A for effort. It got a long way from from zero to the speed that he got. But it's like that's not the end of how good reasoning can get.
Quick question: should you say I went to Chipotle with Aristotle, or I went to Chipotle with Aristotle?
I do say Chipotle sometimes for fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
Chipotle with Aristotle sounds a lot better. I get that.
Chipotle with Aristotle. If I ever get an opportunity to talk with like an actual philosopher, I will say Aristotle on it, like, and Socrates, like they did in Bill and Ted.
Yeah.
Plato.
All right. He says that there's an idea which you may have noticed I hate, that you can define a word any way you like. You think he still feels that way?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably more so. Especially because most of my stuff, from him is like the sequences and method rationality. He seems like a pretty like chipper and upbeat guy.
Yeah, but those are like 15 years old now.
Well, methods isn't that old.
Okay.
But my thing is, I feel like now he's a bit grumpier. And so I think if to say that if he hates anything more, I think it's more now than he used to.
Okay.
I think back then it used to annoy him. He's like, now it's what's got us to where we are. God damn it! Now we're counting the minutes. Not the minutes, but the years.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not making a joke so much as, you know what I mean. I'm being good natured about that.
Yeah.
I take his concerns very seriously. But it's like, if you guys weren't too busy fucking jerking each other around about intelligence versus capabilities versus yada yada, it's like, no, just how dangerous are these things? How powerful are they? And don't concern yourselves with the edges of those definitions, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it says intelligence has to come from a squishy meat brain. Well, you know what? Then fuck you, right? Like, I think I would have less patience for those the longer I made that point. In fact, the longer I made that point, the more annoyed I got in the course of 90 seconds. So
okay.
I think if I was making that point for 15 years, I'd be more annoyed about it, right? If you're beating the same drum for 15 years, do you think you'd get more angry or just tired?
Just tired.
Yeah, I think it'd be both.
I think he's, honestly, it seems like he's a little bit more mellow in his videos nowadays where he talks with people, because he's just like, well, this is what it's going to be like. And so he's like, sit down, walk people through the thing. He's like, yep, I understand. You have all these objections like everyone else does, and I'm just going to go through them with you. Like, I was surprised by how that video we talked about last time, which I don't remember who the other guy was, the accelerationist guy. He never like lost his cool or anything. He's just like, yep, let's talk about these things the way you're talking about them.
I didn't listen to it on the drive to Fort Collins that day, but I did on the way back because I was bored, and I got 45 minutes into it before I troubled myself to find something else to listen to while on the highway.
Yeah, because
I'm like, I'm gonna find something else while driving to change it from what I'm listening to, because this is so not fun.
There's nothing here. Yeah. All right. The last thing he says in here that I pulled out is, if you're going to have an Aristotelian proverb at all, the proverb should be, definitions don't need words. Sure, that was an interesting point.
I like that. It's a nice bumper sticker. I mean, and he does kind of break it out, but what does that mean, right?
Like, you can point to the properties a thing has, and you don't necessarily need words.
Right. You can have just the characteristics.
Yeah.
He used this whole post without saying bleg or rube.
Yeah.
And he didn't actually even use any of the characteristic names. He broke it all the way down to just letters as symbols for it, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, if we're all going to sit here and argue about what intelligence means, then we don't need to use the word intelligence. We can just use the words that we can use the words we're arguing over, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Which brings us nicely to our next post.
Taboo Your Words, a hugely influential post. I guess like just this entire sequence is sort of about this, and taboo is the word that came out of it that we use in our society as to what we're doing here. But the interesting thing about this, I did not remember this part. I thought taboo was taken from the cultural practice of, certain things are taboo. They are not to be talked about or touched or whatever. It comes from the game Taboo by Hasbro.
Yeah.
Which I remember playing.
I think that's where they got the name for the game.
Well, yes.
Yeah, but he got it from the game.
Yeah. I mean, I know he knows the origin of the game's name as well, but like he just says like, yeah, play the game of Taboo when you are discussing these things. It's like that's neat.
I remember the game thing because he gives the example of you might get your partner to say baseball without using the words sport, bat, hit, pitch, base, or of course baseball. He says, as soon as I see a problem like that, I at once think an artificial group conflict in which you use a long wooden cylinder to whack a thrown spheroid, then run between 4 safe positions. I remember specifically when I first read that, I was like, you thought of that immediately? Like, that's not fair. Well, it would take me a minute and a half, 2 minutes to think of something, to think of a full sentence like that was that descriptive. Like, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Well, go back and read the 4 words that are tabooed, or the 5 words that are tabooed. He used a short description of every single one of those words. Yeah.
But I just, when he said I at once think, I remember that striking out to me. I was like, oh, that would have taken me effort. You thought of that at once? Yeah. So I remember the game origin of this from my first time reading it.
Okay.
That is the point of the game, right? But it's like that almost sort of defeats the point if you make it that easy. As one might say, it violates the spirit of the game, but not the rules of the game.
Right. That's called technique.
That's right.
For example, the whole does a tree make a sound in the forest? If they replace what they mean by sound with auditory experience or vibrations in the air, then there's no conflict. On the other hand, if they replace the word in the Socrates syllogism, Socrates matches the concept, this person will die after drinking hemlock, versus Socrates matches the concept, this person will not die after drinking hemlock, then they actually have a substantive clash of expectations, which is what you want to find out. Like, do we actually have a clash of what we expect to see in the real world when we have a disagreement?
Yeah, and look at that. We can test it. We can have them drink hemlock. We can put and that's the thing is like with Albert and Barry, if, the sound in the forest, does it need a listener or not? Once they like articulate what it is they're talking about, instead of like arguing about what sound means, they like, oh yeah, we have no difference of expect. So they don't need to conduct an experiment. They realize that they've dissolved their confusion, right? Yeah. Whereas if you actually think Socrates had survived, it's like, all right, drink up, buddy. We're going to do a science at you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They might keep arguing if there was some compelling reason to have sound mean one specific thing, like a tax incentive if it means one thing or another, or social proof of goodness if it means one thing or another. But if all you want to know is what can we expect out of reality, then you don't need to keep arguing.
Like a vaguely culture war example, because I dislike, because you say tax incentive, like, all right, yeah, that makes sense. They'll argue anything to make it fit into the definition of like charity or something, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, me buying this $200 million painting for my best friend, that was charity, right? But like a bad example is, anyone who defines the word racist as anyone who treats racist differently for any reason under any circumstance. Right. You're going to say that's racist. What if the only way I treat racists differently is if I give black homeless people twice as much money as anyone else?
You racist. Might be kind of racist.
But I mean, someone that does not fit with what someone tries to mean when they use the word racist, right?
Depends on the person.
I suppose, but not the person that I'm imagining arguing with.
Okay,
right?
okay.
Like they think.
Not a person that you would argue with,
right.
Most likely.
Yeah. I don't know. I would think that's kind of racist.
I can't think it would make me bad in the way that someone accusing someone of racism typically speaks. Okay. Right? Like they usually mean like, oh, you're prejudiced. You're whatever,
well, usually when they say racist, they mean racist against black or brown people.
Yeah, but I mean, I could even make a case where it's like, yeah, I give twice as much to black and brown people because I anticipate other people are giving them less.
Okay.
Right.
So you're trying to make up for other people's racism with counter racism.
Like I suppose you could call it counter racism or just like giving to where I feel like I could do the most good.
Okay.
Like if I actually felt that way.
I see.
Or say if I had great survey data of, people who gave money to beggars in New York or something, right?
Right.
And it's like, oh, look at that. People give a third as much to Hispanic beggars as they do to white beggars. I should give 2/3 as much, or I should give 3 times as much, right? Like just to counterbalance that.
I mean, honestly, you shouldn't ever give money to beggars.
I know, but I'm just imagining somebody.
It just encourages more begging.
I'm just arguing with somebody in my head, like somebody who uses a dumb definition of racism.
Okay.
My main thing, actually, it's not the begging thing. It's people who say that if you have any results whatsoever on an implicit association test.
Oh, okay.
And it's like, there's such a huge difference between having, and I'm sure, I know I took them back in school. I don't remember any of my results. I'm sure I had some, but it's like there's such a difference between that and being like, man, I hate those brown and black people.
Yeah.
Like if you have an implicit bias where it's like, oh yeah, you're 7 sevenths of a second slower to associate positive terms with a black face or something, and you're aware of that, you're trying to correct for that, and you're trying to be a better person. That is so importantly removed from like actual racism that you want to stop, right?
Yeah. That's like literally trying to find racism in people so you can accuse them of racism.
Yeah.
And you can even be a little bit more surgical and say, it's not just that because I got this score on the implicit association test that I hate black and brown people, but that I even treat them differently, because that's all it would take for a racist, to be racist. But at the same time, just because you score that on the implicit association test doesn't mean you're even doing that, so, you don't have to go as far as saying I hate them to still like be annoyed that people would just take that, conclusion from your implicit association test scores.
Yeah. Well, and it's like we talked about with, this, because I was going to say another place where definitions and words really, really matter is the law, right? It is the guy that we concluded was guilty of attempted murder via extreme indifference. He's now an attempted murderer, right? That's a serious label to have on somebody, and that actually, like the definition of what extreme indifference means, that was actually super important. Although the words themselves weren't, that's actually important to Eliash's point here, is like we tossed those out and just say, look, what does that actually mean? We can quit saying, if one of them was like knowingly, it's like, well, what does knowingly mean? Forget it. Let's not talk about that. Let's look at the definition of knowingly, which doesn't use the word knowingly, and we'll fill in that long paragraph instead of the word.
You actually did this in your deliberations?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. I forget if it was for knowingly or if it was for some other specific single word that was tripping us up. Because the difference would have been like intending to do something versus it just happening versus with your negligence or something. And I forget whether the word was intent or knowingly or whatever, but one of those words contained, the definition of it contained the other word in it. And so we started just subbing it out for that. We wouldn't read the whole paragraph every time, but we'd say, look here, just this is what we're talking about, this whole sheet. But to the point, yeah, it's like, forget the handle. If the handle's confusing, toss it out and just look at what you're pointing at. Right?
Yeah. He points out the thing you picked up on much earlier about this is useful because of people arguing whether artificial intelligence is really intelligent or whatever. He says, ask futurists to describe what they expect to see without ever using words like computers or think, and you might find quite a conflict of expectations. And the first line of defense is not to define your problematic terms, but to see whether you can think without using those terms at all. Which I think counts to what you were doing, like subbing in the big thing instead.
Yeah.
So be careful not to use a new word instead. Describe outward observables and interior mechanisms. Don't use a single handle. And finally here, as a thing you can do if you want to have fun on your own at home with some friends, describe what it is you think people do or do not have without using the word free will at all. If you want to try this at home, you should avoid the words choose, act, decide, determined, responsible, or any of their synonyms.
Yeah, that's a good at-home exercise. It's funny, when I first read these, I remember not feeling equipped to do that because I was just, at that time, I was like immersed in all like the fun philosophy stuff. I was pretty sure where I felt on that, but I didn't feel equipped for this exercise at all. Now I feel like we could knock it out here in 90 seconds. But it's funny because he says, like, don't make up new words. I know that from reading this, he takes a lot of enjoyment from Dan Dennett's philosophy and his writing. So do I, but that guy makes up words left and right. But he makes it clear that's what he's doing. The word intuition pump, or the phrase, And I forgot that he had a corollary for that called, it's not like a sky crane, it's something else, but...
Skyhook?
Yeah, skyhook maybe.
Okay.
Where it's like, this is the opposite, like it's pulling it up, but it's not actually anchored to anything, so it's just...
Yeah.
But although that's not the opposite of intuition pump, there was some opposite intuition pump.
Okay.
That he argued that I think John Searle didn't like the Chinese room experiment or thought experiment. He thought that John Searle, whatever the guy's first name was, He thought that he's using the opposite of an intuition pump,
Okay.
and I can't remember the word for it. But like
Bullshit factory.
right? Bullshit factory. But yeah, no, but Dennett makes up stuff left and right, and I like it because it's then you get fun new handles for long concepts, right?
Yeah.
But
Scott Alexander does that a lot too, which is super handy.
yeah, sometimes it's handy.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you and I are talking about, if we're having the standard argument about sound, if we replace it, all right, we're not going to use the word sound, we're going to use the word purple.
That doesn't help anything.
Right, doesn't help anything. Cool.
All right. Well, for next time, we will be reading the LessWrong posts, Replace the Symbol with the Substance, and Fallacies of Compression.
Fun on the button.